What I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. Zuni. So in section 2.3, we're going to be looking at some ways of finding the zeros. And so the first algorithm is a division algorithm. So if f of x and dx are polynomials, such that dx is not equal to 0 and the degree of dx is less than or equal to the degree of f of x, then there exists a unique polynomial qx and rx such that f of x is equal to dx times q of x plus rx. D of x is the divisor, q of x is the quotient, and rx is the remainder. When rx is equal to 0, the degree of rx is less than the degree of dx. If the remainder rx is 0, then dx divides evenly into f of x. So when we want to apply this theorem or algorithm, we need to write the terms of the dividend and divisor in descending powers, insert placeholders with 0 coefficients for missing terms, and we'll discuss this as we go through the examples. So if we want to divide the polynomial 5x squared plus 3x minus 2 by x plus 1 using long division, then we can write this as x plus 1, and then we have 5x squared plus 3x minus 2. So the x plus 1 is what we call a divisor, and whatever's inside of the box here is a dividend. And so when we're dividing, let's say, a number, something like this, then we ask ourselves, how many times does 2 go into 17? That's 8. So then we multiply 8 times 2 is 16. And then we subtract 17 minus 16 is 1. And then we bring down the next number, and we start the process again. 2 goes into 11 5 times. And now since 2 is greater than 1, we can stop. This is your remainder. This is your quotient. This is your divisor. And this number is your dividend. And so when dividing polynomials, we have the same process. And so here we have 5x squared. We need to make sure that they're in descending order. So we have a 2 and a 1, which is in descending order. And so here 5x squared divided by x is going to be 5x. In other words, 5x times x is 5x squared. And 5x times 1 is 5x. Then we want to subtract, but we're going to be subtracting everything in this parentheses. So by doing that, we're distributing this negative into both terms. So now we would have 5x squared minus 5x squared is 0. And 3x minus 5x will give me a negative 2x. Our next step is to bring down this negative 2. And so we start the process again. So x goes into 2x. My negative 2 times. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Since we're subtracting, like we did here, basically by subtracting this entire thing, we're changing the sign of each of these terms. So instead of a negative, this will become positive because negative and negative is positive. And then negative and negative will also be positive. So negative 2x and 2x is 0. Negative 2 and 2 is 0. So we say that our remainder is 0. This is our divisor, x plus 1. And then our quotient is 5x minus 2. And everything in here is our dividend. Okay, so to write our answer, we write it as our quotient plus the remainder divided by our divisor. Okay, so my quotient here is 5x minus 2 plus my remainder of 0 divided by the quotient. Whenever we get remainder of 0, this is going to be very helpful, and we can say that if the remainder is 0, then the divisor is a factor of the polynomial. And basically what this means is you have a factor. So your quotient, your divisor is a factor, so x plus 1 is a factor. And once we know the factor, then we can find the 0 by setting that factor equal to 0. So since your factor was a 0 and we got remainder of 0, we can also use the quotient will also be a factor. So we get that x is equal to 2/5 is your other 0. Okay, so your factor and quotient would be zeros, which again is what we were looking for in the last section. Here's -1 and then 2/5. So again, we can do this only if the remainder is 0. So let's try another one. We have 3, and we're going to divide x cubed. Make sure they're in descending order. So we have 3, 2, minus 5x plus 5. So the powers are in descending order. And then I have x cubed. How many times does x go into x? So that's x squared. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times -3 is -3x squared. Since we're subtracting, we're changing the signs for each of these. So x cubed and negative x cubed cancel. 4x squared plus 3x squared is 7x squared. Bring down the next term. So minus 5x. And then we ask ourselves how many times is x going to 7x squared? So that's going to be 7x. 7x times x is 7x squared. 7x times 3 is -21x. Change the signs. So that cancels. 5x plus 21 is 16x. Bring down the 5. How many times does x go into 16x? That's going to be 16. 16 times x is 16x minus 48. Change the sign. So this cancels, and then we get 53. So our answer is our quotient, which is x squared plus 7x plus 16 plus the remainder of 53 divided by our divisor. Since we didn't get the remainder to be 0, then we cannot find the actual zeros. Go to the next page. And let's divide one more. So first, we need to write these in descending order. So my divisor here is 3x plus 1. And then we have a 6x to the 4th minus x cubed plus 9x, or actually x squared here, minus x squared plus 9x minus 3. Okay, so I'm going to start the problem and then we'll go from there. So 6x to the 4th, 3x goes into 6x to the 4th. That would be 2. 2 times 3 is 6. And then we have x cubed. So 2 times 3 is 6, x to the 4th plus 2x cubed. Change the signs. So this cancels, and then negative 2x cubed minus x cubed is negative 3x cubed. Bring down the negative x squared. So 3x goes into 3x cubed. That's going to be x squared. So 3x times negative x squared is negative 3x cubed. And 1 times x squared is negative x squared. Change the signs. So we cancel here, and this will become 0. And so we bring down the 9x.